In this Club Random podcast, host Bill Maher and guest Harvey Levin discuss the appreciation they have for each other's work. Harvey Levin explains that he is a fan of Bill Maher's show and appreciates the recognition he has received from the mainstream establishment. Bill Maher then talks about his experience hosting for Larry King and how it was a regular presence for him in the 80s. Harvey Levin then talks about how he gets his news from TMZ, and Bill Maher talks about how he has given up cable news and is much happier getting his news from Harvey Levin. They both agree that Harvey Levin's show covers topics that are not just celebrity stuff. The Alec Baldwin case is brought up and the legal implications of it. They agree that the prosecution of Alec Baldwin is outrageous, and that he did not intend to shoot the cinematographer. They also discuss the legal implications of manslaughter and how it differs from getting drunk and driving. They suggest that the prosecution of the armorer could be due to the fear of COVID-19, and that if it were a play, it would be used to make a point about how America reacts to crises. They also discuss the concept of fourth-degree murder and how it could be applied in this case. Generation differences is also brought up. Bill expresses his belief that the younger generation has a lot of contempt for those in charge, while Harvey believes that every generation does the best they can given the circumstances. They both agree that technology has a large influence on history, and that the younger generation is likely to blame those in charge for the current state of the world. Ultimately, they agree that the younger generation has a right to be frustrated, but that they should not be too quick to judge those in charge. Bill Maher and Harvey Levin discuss their experiences in their 20s, and how they have changed over the years. They also talk about the changing media landscape, with people getting their news from TikTok and social media, and how cable is in trouble due to cord cutters. They also discuss the younger generation's lack of knowledge about the past, with one of Maher's crew not knowing who Walter Cronkite is. To illustrate this, Maher tells a story about working in his dad's liquor store and seeing the introduction of Lay's potato chips for the first time. They also bring up the comedy writers on the show, and how they often make jokes about Bill's age. Harvey takes umbrage with this attitude, noting that ageism is the last prejudice, and that Bill looks great and is in better shape than the writers. Bill appreciates the writers for bringing different perspectives to the show and for helping to shape what he does. He also notes that the dynamic between him and the writers is similar to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, where they are not family but act like it and make fun of him, which he loves. Bill Maher and Harvey Levin talk about the 9/11 fifth plane conspiracy. Harvey Levin explains that the premise of the conspiracy is that there was a fifth plane that was supposed to take off from JFK at 9 a.m. on the same day as the other four planes. He goes on to explain that the FBI was alarmed and locked the plane up after everyone was evacuated. They found box cutters in the seat pockets, and the pilot believes someone came on the plane to get rid of them before anyone searched the plane. The FBI took the flight attendants to a lineup to see if they could identify the people that were running on the plane, but they couldn't, and the FBI never followed up on it. This conversation reveals the possibility of a fifth plane being involved in the 9/11 attacks and a lack of follow-up from the FBI. In this portion of the Club Random podcast, host Bill Maher and guest Harvey Levin discuss the importance of pop culture and how it can be used to draw attention to important issues. They also discuss the dangers of tribalism and how it can lead to political hatred and violence. They point out that heated conversations are healthier than no conversations at all, and that people should be able to talk to each other even if they disagree. They also discuss the idea of irreconcilable differences and how it can lead to a national divorce if people are not able to talk to each other. Finally, they point out that some people are so indoctrinated that logic cannot reach them, and that this is true on both sides of the political spectrum. They also discuss the cognitive dissonance between the world and their own lives. They both agree that their 20s were the best years of their lives, as they were more in control, more comfortable with themselves, and more successful. They then discuss the first times in their lives that were great, such as the first time they got laid, smoked pot, and got up on stage and got laughs. Harvey then talks about his first house, which he bought in April of 1986. He was excited to have his own land and felt like an adult now that he had to pay a mortgage of $1,450 a month. Bill Maher and Harvey Levin talk about the joys of adulthood, such as taking care of one's own home and the freedom to make one's own decisions. They also discuss how Levin's show, TMZ, has changed over the years, becoming less mean and more accepting of different views. Levin also talks about how he and his team have a lot of fun when they are off camera, and how they don't edit when they make fun of each other. Finally, Levin talks about his version of the Jack Benny take, which is a popular comedic routine. Harvey Levin shared a story about his experience with the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. He had a partner, Kevin, who was diagnosed with AIDS and was near death. One night, Cher, a client of Kevin's, showed up at the door and asked to see him. She spent 45 minutes talking to him, even though he was in a coma, and then left without saying anything. Harvey was touched by her compassion and generosity, and has never talked about it until now. He loves her for her kindness and understanding. They also bring up the late singer and actress, Whitney Houston. Harvey Levin recounts a meaningful moment he shared with Houston, where she visited his dying father and provided him with a peaceful moment. Bill Maher explains why he was a fan of Houston, noting her genuine and ballsy nature. They then discuss an incident where Houston was criticized for a tweet about the George Floyd murder, and how celebrities today would not be able to express their opinions without fear of being cancelled. Harvey Levin and Bill Maher discuss the power of celebrity, and how it can be used to make a point. They use the example of Sacheen Littlefeather, who was booed and jeered when she accepted Marlon Brando's Oscar on his behalf. They also discuss how corporate companies are so scared of being cancelled that they will fire people or put them in a corner if they misstep. They also mention how the public may not agree with the extremes, but it is the extremes that are running the country due to the fear of corporate companies. They continue on with bringing up the late response of Ronald Reagan to the AIDS crisis. Harvey Levin recounts the trauma of the time, when people were getting fired from jobs, thrown out of apartments, and disowned by their families. He also praises Cher for not buying into the fear. Bill Maher then asks Harvey how he avoided the bullet, to which Harvey responds that it was random and scary. The conversation then turns to the randomness of life, from birth defects to illness to accidents, and how it is so unpredictable and scary. In this section, they discuss the fragility of life and how it is both easy and hard to die. They discuss how Matthew Perry was close to death due to drugs and operations, and how it is easy to die but also hard to do so. They then discuss the natural lifespan of humans, which is around 100, and how this is possible due to eating right, not smoking, not drinking, and not eating processed food, sugar, meat, or dairy. They then bring up the importance of mental health and its connection to physical health. They cite the example of the strongly religious community of Yorba Linda, California, which has a high rate of longevity. They suggest that religion can provide peace of mind and that this could be a key to health and longevity. Bill Maher then explains his own views on religion, saying that while he cannot fool himself into believing in it, he can understand why it works for some people. He suggests that the other 5 blue zones, which have high rates of longevity, may also have strong religious communities that provide peace of mind. The idea of peaking, and how it can help people stay energized and motivated is also brought up. They reminisce about a past incident where Bill was very drunk and thought he was going into an IHOP. They also recall a t-shirt that said, "I'm not gay but $50 is $50, which made them both laugh. The conversation then turns to a big event in the mid-90s that was honoring lawyers, and how someone mistook Bill for being with a woman. This conversation highlights the importance of staying energized and motivated, as well as the humorous moments that can be shared between friends. Bill Maher and guest Harvey Levin discuss the secret to life and how to stay young. They recall an event from the 90s where a judge got up and told a joke about a guy dating a girl and the girl saying he reminded her of a pedophile. They also discuss the excitement of being invited to events and how it can't be duplicated with material possessions. Lastly, they discuss their one big argument, which was about the Beatles and how Harvey read a book that Bill recommended and had a different opinion. Ultimately, they agree that the secret to life is to find new things, and that is what keeps you young. They end the podcast by talking about the Beatles and the documentary about them. They talk about how the documentary showed the connection between John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and how they ignored Yoko Ono. They then suggest watching the documentary together every Friday night. Finally, they joke about Harvey Levin appearing on Bill Maher's Christmas show. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of the Pod Slice.